Cold billionaire ignores wife for 3 years before falling madly in love one night. Love hello, my lovely family and friends, and I hope you are doing well. To each and every one of you for your incredible support and kind words, as well as your love and appreciation for my previous stories. And sincere comments truly mean a lot to me. I read each and every one. I'm so excited to share these stories with you because I know how much you all enjoy them. Another blockbuster romance today, and I can assure you that this one will steal the show. Your heart is full of intense feelings, passionate love, and a journey that will leave you breathless. Therefore, I have a quick request. Please share your favorite scene from today's story with me in the comments section as you watch. Which parts most moved you? Your presence and involvement are crucial. Before we begin, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and show it to your friends. Let's spread the love and make this lovely storytelling journey even better. Bigger right now, so let's get started on today's blockbuster love story right away. Lily had lived in the vast, cold mansion for 3 long years that did not echo. It was a palace built on love in the deafening silence of loneliness. Although to her, Martin Blackwood's success is a sign of his power and influence, felt like a golden cage, grand and opulent but devoid of warmth, though the gold hues of wealth were reflected in the crystal chandeliers above her head and the velvet drapes, cascaded like promises that had been forgotten, and every room of the house exuded luxury, but it had no meaning. When the man she had once loved so deeply had drifted so far away from her, she had married Martin with romantic fantasies about a beautiful life, and their nights would be filled with whispered confessions and passionate embraces, the space between their hands where his eyes would long to find her, intertwined with love and laughter, but those hopes had vanished. Under the weight of his ambitions, the moment he became obsessed, she had been pushed into the midst of his empires and wealth's expansion. In the whirlwind of his endless business meetings, shadows are lost. In discussions in the boardroom, he was no longer the man who once held her like she was his entire world. The brutal and cold billionaire Martin Blackwood was a man whose heart now beat his hand only for numbers and stock prices from business transactions. His lips, which had once been so gentle and possessive on her skin, now only moved across documents and keyboards, whispered sweet things in her ear, now only talking about love and market shares and investors. Romance. It appeared that he had long since forgotten the meaning of those words, and the realization broke her heart every single day. But Lily had tried, and how hard she tried. Had tried for years. She had spent years trying to bring the two of them back together to remind him that their marriage was founded on love rather than a signed contract. She wore the most stunning gowns that embraced her curves in honor of her vows. Ways she knew once drove him insane. She spent hours preparing his favorite meals, preparing dishes to perfection so that she could catch a glimpse of his appreciation. She planned romantic dinners, turned down the lights, lit candles, and set the table for two, waiting with the hope that tonight maybe he would come home and look at her the way he used to. But every time it ended, the same way he would walk past her, distracted, a curt nod or a murmured. Later, with Lily as his only acknowledgement, he avoided her at times, failing to notice her at all. Mind too consumed by his empire through billion-dollar deals and the unrelenting pursuit, she had everything: a grand home designer, dresses extravagant, of more success jewelry. But if it wasn't the one thing she craved the most, what was the point? Tonight, his love was nowhere to be found. In their opulent home, another woman sat by the enormous floor-to-ceiling window. She was in a penthouse gazing at the city skyline, which sparkled like distant dreams, could no longer touch the romantic meal she had prepared for hours. A candle-lit setting with his favorite wine, and a table designed for two that is beautifully set up remained unmoved, and the low, flickering flames mocked her efforts. Martin was in his study, casting shadows on the empty seat opposite her. He had been so engrossed in numbers and files, as he always was, that he hadn't even bothered to check what she had prepared. Even when she realized how much work she had put into making this evening special, her heart painfully clenched as she got up from her seat, her fingers firmly gripping the dress's fabric, and took a deep breath before making her way toward his study. Maybe he would listen. Maybe he would look at her. See, she stopped at the door to let him know that she was right there waiting for him to remember how much she used to love him. Through the small gap through which she could see him, her heart was pounding against her ribs. His brows furrowed in concentration, his chiseled jaw tense his fingers, moving swiftly across the keyboard, as if his next move would determine the world's fate. Email. He looked exhausted, yet there was a certain ruthlessness in the way he worked, a hunger for success that consumed him entirely. His dark hair was his crisp white shirt is discolored from running his fingers through it in anger, slightly undone at the collar, revealing the smooth skin of his neck. He was breathtakingly handsome even in his lack of interest, and the fact that the man she loved so deeply could be in front of her, yet feel so far away and inaccessible, as if they lived in two separate worlds, swallowing her pain. She knocked softly, Martin, her voice barely audible above a whisper and fraught with trepidation. She mistook him for didn't hear her, but then he exhaled impatiently, rubbing his temples before glancing at her briefly. Not now, Lily. I'm in the middle of something important. Something important? The words sliced through her like a knife. Wasn't she important? Wasn't their marriage important? Become so insignificant in his life that he couldn't even spare her a moment. She tried to hide her pain by biting her lip, trying to conceal that you hadn't eaten. I tried to smile again, thinking maybe we could, Lily. But he interrupted. His voice was firm and almost dismissive the second time I asked, "Please don't now. Disturb me?" He didn't even look at her properly, just like that. She was dismissed as if she nodded, stepping forward as though she were nothing more than an inconvenience. A lump formed in her throat. "Okay," she whispered, before turning, barely able to communicate. She went back to their bedroom, her heels gently tapping against the marble floors, each step feeling heavier than the last. By the time she reached their enormous empty bed, her vision blurred with unshed tears. How much she had waited 3 years. So how much longer could she continue doing this? How much longer could she pretend that everything was fine? Yearning, trying 3 years of giving her love to a man who had forgotten how to love her back. But if he wouldn't see her, if he wouldn't remember the passion they once had, then she would make him see her. She would remind him that she was more than just a fix in his life. She was his wife, the woman he had once held with possessiveness, the one he had once kissed with unrelenting. She was starving, and this time she wouldn't let him ignore her. She had no idea that everything would be altered by one choice, Lily realized as she looked in the large mirror. She stared at the woman in their vast bedroom, her delicate fingers tracing the silk robe's silk fabric. Reflected back at her, the woman who had spent 3 long years waiting, longing, yearning for the man who once worshipped her, with every breath he took, the man who had once held her so tightly afraid to lose her, but now barely glanced at her, her heart clenched as she remembered she was haunted by their love in the same way that Martin used to whisper sweet nothings into her ear through his touch. Shivers down her spine the way he had once pulled her into his arms with possessiveness, needing her as much as he needed air. But those days were gone, buried beneath the weight of his business. Empire lost in the abyss of his ruthless ambition, and yet she wasn't. Ready to give up, no, tonight would be different tonight. She would remind him of the woman he once craved, the woman he once looked at with unrelenting desire, in case he had forgotten what it felt like to love her. She would make him remember taking a deep breath. She stepped closer as she picked up the deep red lipstick that had been Martin's. She gave in to her vanity, her hands trembling slightly, favored on her lips as she slowly moved the bold color over her mouth. Her long, silky hair gave her a sense of power and made her feel like the woman she had almost forgotten she was. Her back in gentle waves, her skin shining in the golden light of the shadow Alyre, above her eyes shimmering with determination, and as she slipped into a breathtaking gown that hugged her. Curves in all the right places, a dress so alluring, so sinful, it was impossible to ignore. She knew there was no turning back tonight. She wouldn't beg for his attention. Tonight she would take it with each step she took down the marble hallway, her heels clicking. Her anticipation of the silence of the mansion, amplifying the beat of her heart against the cold floors. Storm raging inside her, the dining table still untouched from the romantic dinner. The preparations she had made now stood as a painful reminder of all the nights she had spent waiting for him and all the nights he had chosen his work over her. But not tonight, as she continued to walk, her hands pointing at her. Sides, her self-assurance rising with each passing second until she reached the entrance of his study, made her catch her breath as she saw him still buried in his work. Lost in the endless cycle of business meetings and contracts, but this time she wouldn't let him dismiss her. Pushing open the door without hesitation, she stepped inside her presence. Demanding Martin really looked up for the first time in 3 years, capturing his attention. At her, and for the first time in 3 years. 3 years she saw something flicker in his dark eyes, something raw, something dangerous, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. In a long time his gaze traveled over her slow, deliberate, as if he was seeing her for the first time. As if he couldn't believe the woman standing before him was his wife. The wife he had neglected, the wife he had ignored. His jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the pen in his hand. His entire body remained still. The silence was oppressive, as though ensnared in a spell, and for the first time in 3 years, they were separated by silence, not the cold. Distant silence of their broken marriage, but the kind of silence that was thick with unspoken desires, and something prohibited Lily. He couldn't control himself, his voice hoarse, uncertain, as if he weren't. She was real, and she wasn't going to let him down, whether she was real or just a cruel illusion sent to torture him. "Look away this time. You've been working too much, Martin," she said, her voice soft yet firm, the edge of longing laced within her words. "It's time to take a—" As he choked hard, his throat bobbed, but he kept his eyes on her. Breathing uneven, and for the first time he didn't have an immediate response. For the first time, his business deals weren't the only thing on his mind. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers, and looking at her as if trying to figure out what had changed, trying to figure out how the woman he once loved had become a stranger to him, a stranger from whom he suddenly could not tear himself away. His eyes away from Lily. "I have a lot to—" He stopped, his own voice betraying him, his own control slipping as his gaze dipped to the soft curves of her body, to the way the gown teased every inch of her, and something inside him snape-taped. He had spent 3 years convincing himself that love, romance, passion, it was all a distraction, given that his empire needed him more than his wife needed him, and that he was successful, was the only thing that mattered. But as he stared at her right now, he realized how foolish and blind he had been. Been to the woman who had been waiting for him all along, the woman who had never given up on him come here. He finally, speaking in a rough, desperate voice, she heard him say, obeyed, stepping closer, closing the distance between them until she was standing right in front of him, so close he could reach out and touch her, so close that he could inhale her perfume's intoxicating scent. Rekindled something primal within him that he had suppressed for years. He reached out to her with cold indifference, rubbing his fingers against her wrist. Hesitant, almost afraid, but when she didn't pull away, when she didn't retreat. As he pulled her into his lap, he let out a shaky breath and tightened his grip. He gripped her tightly against him in a single swift motion, as if he was afraid she would disappear. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his lips grazing. Lily's heart nearly stopped as her breath warmed her skin against the delicate curve of her shoulder. So long since he had touched her, so long since he had looked at her like this, as if she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She tilted her head, her fingers threading through his hair. Her voice, she said, "Then why did you stop looking at me?" Barely above a whisper. Question hung between them, heavy, painful, and Martin felt it deep in his chest. Felt the weight of everything he had ignored, everything he had taken for granted. Hurt her, made her feel like she wasn't loved. And now, as he held her in his arms, he recognized one as the warmth of her body pressed against his. He was absolutely certain that he would never allow her to experience lips found hers in a kiss that was desperate, urgent, filled with 3 years of longing, 3 years of regret, 3 years of loss. Time that he was determined to make amends. She gave him a second kiss and melted into him. As she surrendered to the fire that had never truly died between them, Martin Blackwood realized one undeniable truth. He was falling madly, desperately, irrevocably in love with his wife all over again. Martin lay on the vast, cold bed. His mind was restless. His body was rigid, and his eyes were wide open as he looked at the dark ceiling above his thoughts, consumed by the woman sleeping beside him. The woman he had fallen in love with, but had neglected for 3 years, erroneously assumed that his irregular breathing and pounding heart were normal. Harder than in any previous high-stakes negotiation, boardroom meeting, or ruthless business transaction, because nothing he had ever done had made him feel this way. Long before this desperate, raw, and completely consumed by a single individual, and however, she was his wife, the one who had always been by his side, the one who had waited for him, fought with him, and loved him despite his coldness. Neglect his indifference? How had he not seen it before? How had he been so blind? His throat felt tight, his chest constricted with emotions. He didn't know how to handle emotions he had long buried beneath his relentless ambition. Emotions that were now roaring back to life with. He turned his head slightly in vengeance, refusing to be ignored any longer. Sharp, dark eyes locking onto Lily's sleeping form, his breath hitching as he took in the sight of her. The way the soft moonlight streaming through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, her chest rose and fell with each slow, steady breath, illuminated her delicate features. And her lips, those lips he had just rediscovered, remained slightly parted, swollen from the desperate, fevered kisses they exchanged just hours earlier. The mere thought of how she reacted to him, the way she had clung to him, was primal, had trembled in his arms. Awakened something possessive, ominous, and overwhelming within him. Wanted to wake her, to pull her against him, to claim her again and again until she had always known that she belonged to him. So there was no doubt in her mind that she belonged to him, and Martin Blackwood, the cold, ruthless billionaire, owned it. Who had once convinced himself that love was nothing more than a distraction, was now utterly, hopelessly, irreversibly in love with her love. The word sent a shiver down his spine, making his pulse race, making his jaw clench as the truth crashed over him like a tidal wave. He loved her. He had always loved her. He had just been too much of a fool to realize it. His fingers twitched at his side, aching to reach out to trace the delicate curve of her cheek, to feel her warmth by running through the silky strands of her long, flowing hair, to reassert himself that she was a real person and that this wasn't just a cruel dream. And yet he hesitated because for the first time in his life, he felt fear. Not the fear of losing a business deal, not the fear of failure, but the fear of having already lost the most precious thing in his life. The worry that his distance and neglect had drawn her too far away, that she had given up on him long before he had even realized what he had lost his stomach. Twisted at the thought, his hands curling into fists, as a wave of guilt crashed over him, suffocating, unbearable. How many nights had she gone to bed alone waiting for him? How many times had she dressed up, hoping he would notice her, only to be met with cold indifference? Count the number of times she smiled at him, only for him to look straight past her. This realization made his chest tighten, ache in a way he had never experienced before. A dull, hollow pain that no amount of success, no amount of money, no amount of power could ever erase. He had hurt her, the only person who had ever truly loved him for who he was. He had hurt her, not for his wealth, not for his empire, but for the man beneath it, all at once. And now, as he watched her drift off to sleep, he felt the unbearable weight of his errors were crushing him. But he was certain of one thing. He would never let her feel that way again, never, carefully, as if afraid she would disappear, his fingers barely grazing her delicate hair strands. She shook slightly at the thought of his feather-light, reverent, almost worshipful touch on her hair. Contact, her brows furrowing for a brief moment before relaxing again, a soft. She let out a sleepy sigh, and the sound gave him a rush of warmth. A strange, intoxicating sensation that made him gasp for air. He wanted to hear that sound again, to make her sigh, to make her moan, to make her whisper his name the way she had tonight, with longing, with need, with love. His jaw clenched as he took a sharp breath, resisting the urge to wake her up, and drag her against him to make up for every second he had left wasted. But he knew she needed to rest. She deserved more than he had ever given her. But starting tomorrow, he would change. That he would change everything. He would show her that she was the most important thing in his life. That no business deal, no amount of money could never compare to how she made him feel, and how she had always made him feel, even when he couldn't see it at the time. He leaned in carefully, brushing her forehead with his lips in the most delicate of kisses, a secret promise, a vow that he would never break. And she slightly shifted at the. She let out a small, contented sigh, and Martin hard swallowed his, heart clenching at the sound. He had almost lost her, but he wouldn't let that happen again. Not now, not ever. Morning. The grand bedroom's heavy curtains let in light, giving off a golden glow over the extravagant space. But Martin's eyes were not on the sunlight. No, his entire world was fixated on the woman he was holding, the woman he had been neglecting for too long, whose warmth, whose beauty, whose very existence now consumed him in a way he never imagined. Lily was still asleep, her body curving slightly in that direction, her long lashes fluttering gently against her soft breathing. Him fair skin, and for the first time in years, Martin found himself unwilling to move away from the world that once held him, refusing to let go. Total concentration, because for the first time business was not his top priority. His heart ached as he looked at her, as power was not empire but her alone. He traced the delicate curve of her cheek with his eyes as he memorized every tiny feature, every soft breath, every unconscious movement she made in her sleep. How had he gone 3 years without realizing that she was acting this way, and without seeing her? He had been missing closeness, this undeniable connection all along. In addition to the ruthless and unrelenting grasp of guilt on his chest, a new emotion took root within him. Foreign yet intoxicating, something he desired to be obsessive about and consuming her. He needed her, and he would never let her feel unloved again. Slowly, carefully, as if afraid to wake her too soon, Martin lifted his hand before finally giving in to the overwhelming urge and brushing a strand. He let his fingers just touch her skin, of hair away from her face. The touch was feather-light, reverent, almost worshipful, and yet it sent a shiver down his spine, his pulse quickening as he felt the warmth of her against his fingertips. Lily stirred slightly, her lips parting in a soft sigh, and Martin held his breath, watching as her lashes fluttered, as her body moved closer to him, as if drawn to his warmth even when he was asleep. Her throat became clenched. Did she even seek his warmth? In unconsciousness, had she spent 3 years longing for this longing for him? His jaw clenched as he pondered the thought, only to be met with cold indifference. He would not allow his hands to curl into fists at his side ever again. Wouldn't allow a single day to pass where she questioned his love, where she wondered if he saw her, if he wanted her, if he desired her as much as she deserved to be desired. And therefore, without pause or thought, he pressed his lips against, his breath warmed her skin as he lingeringly kissed her forehead. Mumbled, "Lily, I love you more than anything in this world." The words came out hoarse, unsteady, as if speaking the loud made the reality he was hit even harder by his feelings. But he didn't care because he had to say it. Needed her to hear it even if she wasn't awake, to truly understand how much he meant it. But as he pulled back slightly, a barely audible but significant murmur came from her lips as his gaze remained fixed on her serene face. His heart stopped. Martin, his name spoken so softly, so his body moved sweetly and naturally as though it had always been there. Tensed, his breath catching in his throat, but before he could process the overwhelming surge of emotion that pierced through him, Lily's eyelashes flung open, revealing his own mesmerizing eyes. Ignored for years, the very eyes that had once only shown him love, only to be met with distance and coldness, and now those eyes were filled with a different kind of confusion, trepidation, and uncertainty. As if she couldn't quite believe he was still there, as if she had anticipated that she would once more wake up by herself, as if she didn't trust him. The reality of the sight shattered him, and he murmured, "Good morning," his voice softer than it had ever been, his fingers reaching out instinctively to trace a on the side of her face to reassure himself that she was here, that she was real, that he hadn't lost her yet. Lily blinked, her lips parted as if she were, her brows slightly furrowed. Wanted to say something, but no words came, only silence. Only a quiet weariness that made Martin's stomach hurt, and he whispered, "I'm still here." His gaze searching hers, pleading with her to see the truth in his eyes, to be aware that he was not going anywhere, that he was not the same man who had ignored her, and that he would not allow another to happen. Day without demonstrating to her how much she meant to him. "I won't leave. You again." Lily inhaled sharply, her lips trembling, as emotions flickered across her face. Hope, doubt, longing, fear, all colliding in a way that made Martin's heart ache, because he knew that she had spent too many nights persuading herself that he would never love her again. And now he was attempting to reverse that. 3 years of neglect in a single morning, trying to make up for every moment he had stolen from her. But he would make it up to her. No matter how long it took, no matter what he had to do, he would make her believe in him again, make her believe in them. He cued her face once more, slowly and carefully, his thumb stroking her cheek. Touch gentle yet firm, as if grounding himself in the reality that she was here, that she was his. He repeated more insistently, "I love you." Time became increasingly desperate, requiring her to believe it and feeling it. Lily's lips parted, her breath hitching, her hands trembling slightly as she reached up, hesitating, before finally resting. Her Martin's name was murmured with uncertainty, palm against his chest and over his heart, with a flimsy hope and a vulnerability that made his chest tighten. But he refused to let her doubt any longer, and therefore he did not permit her to withdraw, nor did he permit her to overthink, question, or retreat into the wall she had built over the years of his coldness. Instead, he leaned in, kissing her lips in a slow, deep, lingering kiss that said nothing. One that pierced his heart and made a promise to her that he would never let her feel alone again against Lily, his entire being consumed by his frantic heartbeat, by her flavor, her warmth, the surprise in her breath, and the trembling in her fingers against his chest, as if she were unable to comprehend what was taking place. But in reality, neither could he explain how he had put off kissing her in this way for so long. 3 empty, long years without the one thing that made him feel. As he held her tightly, he framed her delicate face with his hands, intensified the kiss, releasing every ounce of unspoken regret and buried yearning. He wanted her to feel it, to know that he was here and wasn't going, in every desperate plea for forgiveness. Anywhere that she was the only thing that mattered to him now. But just as he thought she would melt into him, just as she backed away from him, as the urge to make up for every second lost consumed his body. Her wide, unsure eyes were trying to find his face as she strained her breath. "Decipher what exactly caused his sudden change, Martin." Her voice was softly hesitant. The burden of 3 years of being alone, 3 years of waiting, and 3 years of... He was crushed by his disappointment. The guilt was too much, suffocating and invisible as he stared at her and took in the conflict of emotions that was playing out across her beautiful face. Doubt, hopelessness, anxiety, and longing that he had done this to her made her doubt his love, had made her doubt herself. And now she was afraid to believe in him, but she also feared that it would only last for a short time, and that if she gave up hope, she would only be devastated. He felt his chest ache once more, and his stomach began to twist in agony. He had to get this fixed and show her he wasn't the same man, who had turned his back on her, ignored her, and placed business ahead of the one and only thing that had ever truly mattered to him, mattered to Lily, he said in a hoarse roar whisper. He cued her face with emotion, his thumb stroking her cheek slowly to soothe her. "Strokes, I am aware that I do not merit your forgiveness, and I am aware that I have harmed you. You made you think you weren't good enough, but God bless you, Lily. You've always been everything, and I was the greatest fool to ever walk this planet because I neglected the one thing that really mattered." His voice cracked. He breathed her in, his eyes burning with unspoken emotion as he pressed his forehead against hers and let himself drown. In her warmth, her scent, her presence. I can't change the past. He admitted, his fingers clenching against her skin. But I promise you that I will spend every of my life, make amends to you, but don't let go of me. Please. His voice almost sounded like a plea now. This was a desperate and raw confession from a man who had built an empire with ruthless determination, but had never begged for anything in his life known defeat up until this point. Because of this was the only thing that could truly break him. And if he lost her, he would be destroyed in ways he could not have survived. Lily's. Her lips trembled as she took a deep breath and looked at his face, her own emotions raging like a silent storm within her. A moment Martin feared he had lost her, feared that no matter what he said no, he had already caused too much damage, no matter how hard he tried. But then what? Felt like an eternity, and she exhaled tremblingly before hesitantly lifting her hands to rest against his chest. Her touch light, uncertain, yet so incredibly, she whispered, "Valuable Martin, you hurt me." And the pain in her voice sounded like a knife, straight to his heart, twisting and breaking him. "You left me alone for 3 years, tried so hard to get in touch with you, to get you to see me and love me the way I do. Though I loved you, you never looked at me, touched me, or spoke to me the way you are now." Her voice broke, and Martin felt a single tear fall from her cheek. His entire world shatter without thinking, without hesitation. He leaned in and kissed that tear away his lips. His hands were lingering on her skin as he pulled her closer, kneading her in order to get rid of any pain he had caused. "I see you now," he whispered against her skin, his voice trembling. "I swear to you that I will never see you again, Lily." Under the weight of his feelings. "Stop looking at you, love you, and desire you forever." His hands trailed down her arms, tying in with hers as he does so. Pressed her hands to his lips, giving her gentle, reverent kisses, and his gaze remained fixed on her. He said, "Give me a chance, and let me love you the way you are." Deserve a thick layer of silence filled with unspoken words between them. Wounds, but Martin didn't rush her. Instead, he just held her and waited for her. Prayed, and then, after what seemed like an eternity, Lily shakily exhaled from her lips. She whispered, "I don't know if I can trust you yet, but I want to," as they parted. To relief, an overwhelming and all-consuming tsunami swept over Martin. Leaving him breathless, he tightened his grip on her and gave her another longing kiss before letting go. "Me demonstrate it to you," he promised, his voice unwavering. "Determination, one day at a time, one kiss at a time, one moment at a time. I will prove to you that I am yours, completely, irrevocably, madly yours." Lily's breath. Martin realized then that he wasn't just fighting for her when he caught her eyes looking into his body as it trembled against him. Martin would never stop fighting for her love and seeking her forgiveness. Had never been one to be patient or patiently wait for what he wanted. He used ruthless efficiency to build his empire and took what he wanted without hesitation, shaped the world around him with sheer will and unrelenting power. But now, as he stood in the grand bedroom, watching his Lily move about with grace, he was hesitant, but he knew this was different, that she was different, and that for the first time in his life, he would have to earn something instead of taking it, that he would have to fight for the one thing that truly mattered, her love. Unspoken words weighed heavily on the air between them due to years of painful silence, but Martin wasn't blind to the slight trembling in Lily's hands as she reached for the brush on her vanity. Neither was he deaf to it, to the way her breath hitched every time he moved closer, wasn't numb to the way her body tensed when she felt his gaze. She was hesitant and uneasy about him, which killed him and drove him to the edge of madness, because all he wanted to do was hold her in his arms and kiss away all doubts. Her realized that he was completely and forever hers, but he knew he was unable to rush this, gain her trust, or erase 3 years of neglect with only a few words, despite how much he wanted to. He murmured Lily, his voice being softer than he had ever heard it before. A feeling that was so strong it scared him, because he had never let himself feel it before. Feel this deeply. When had he ever let someone have this kind of power over him? But she did, she always had, and he had been too blind, too foolish, too consumed. Lily slightly stiffened at the sound because of his own desire to see it. Of his voice, her delicate fingers gripping the brush a little tighter, her posture tense as if bracing herself for something, and the sight of it, the realization that she expected coldness, distant indifference from him made Martin's chest ache with something close to desperation. "Lily, look at me," he pleaded, taking a slow, cautious step toward her, not wanting to startle her, not wanting her to retreat further into the wall she had built around herself slowly. She turned hesitantly, her wide, unsure eyes focusing on him, and the vulnerability and the fragile hope she struggled to conceal nearly attracted him to his. "Knees, Martin. What do you want?" Her quiet voice was laced with exhaustion, as if she had waited too long and hoped too much, only to be repeatedly disappointed. He choked hard as he got closer, trying to get into her space and making her feel it. The truth in front of him, wanting her to see how much he loved her. "I want you," he said, before he could stop them, before he could question himself because this wasn't, words flew out of his mouth, business. This was not a plan. Rather, it was his honest and open heart, and completely at her mercy. "I want you more than I have ever desired anything in my life, Lily, and I am aware that I do not merit your affection. Failed you. I know I was blind and stupid and so goddamn consumed by my own world that I missed what was directly in front of me. But I now see you and am," his voice trembled. He didn't let go, and his hands were clenched. At his sides because he wanted to touch her, wanted to pull her into him, wanted to feel her warmth, but he knew he had to. You don't get to just say that. You had to let her come to him. "Now, Marin," she whispered, her lips pressed into, her eyes shining with unwiped tears. A thin line, as if she were resisting the feelings that were about to consume her. "You don't get to ignore me for 3 years before deciding that you love me when it suits you." The pain in her voice was unbearable, a sharp blade that cut through his chest, and Martin knew she was right. Knew he had been selfish, that he had taken her for granted, that he had wasted precious time he would never get back. "I know," he rasped, his voice breaking. "I know, Lily, and I swear to you, I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not requesting that you forget what I did. Rather, I am merely requesting an opportunity to make things right, to love you the way you ought to be loved," throughout the silence that existed between them. Martin held his breath, his entire world hanging in the thick, suffocating mass. The balance, because he had never in his life pleaded for anything and had never humbled himself except for Lily. He would do anything for Lily, including falling to his knees and crying. If it meant she would believe in him again, and then after what, she would break through every barrier, wall, and ounce of pride. Felt like an eternity. So Lily sharply inhaled, her shoulders shaking, and her lips puckering. She whispered, "I don't know how to believe you, Martin, but I want," as they parted. To relief crashed over him like a tidal wave, overwhelming and all-consuming under him, his knees nearly giving out, because this was hope. This was it's possible that this marked the beginning of something brand new and real. That had the ability to completely consume him, and he accepted, embraced, and required it. "Let me show you more than his next breath," he murmured. Stepping even closer, he finally extended his hands, rubbing them against her arms with his touch. Reverently hesitant, as if concerned that she would withdraw, as if concerned that she would vanish one day at a time with a single touch. "Let me love you one kiss at a time, Lily." She trembled beneath his touch, her eyes searching his, looking for something she wasn't sure she'd find. And then, after what seemed like forever, she barely nodded. But it was enough, it was everything, and Martin, the ruthless billionaire, the A-man who had labored for years in pursuit of power, wealth, and success, was aware that in this Martin had won the only thing that had ever really mattered at the time. Never before had I experienced desperation, never had any idea what it meant to want something so badly that it consumed every thought of each and every breath and beat of his heart. But as he stood in front of Lily, he watched the hesitation flicker. In her eyes, the war she fought within herself. He was aware that she was the only thing he would ever truly require. Without her, other than the empire he had established, the billions in his bank account, All of his power would be meaningless if she wasn't his, if he couldn't hold her. The way he was meant to, if he couldn't make her see that he was hers irrevocably, completely irrational. Hers, the flames in the air between them. There was a lot of tension and feelings that neither of them could fully express. And Martin Mann, who had always been in charge, set the terms of every deal and never let anyone else decide. In the face of her, nothing or anyone felt able to do anything. As he watched her struggle with the weight of what he was asking, uncertainty felt his heart clench painfully. From her, because he knew he had failed her before knew he had left her alone for too long, had made her feel like she was nothing more than a shadow in his life. But that was not the truth. She was the light, and that was never the case. He had been too blind to see the fire, he had been too foolish to embrace. And now that he had finally opened his eyes, now that he had finally realized that she was the only thing that mattered, he wouldn't let go of her, and he wouldn't let the distance he had created between them pass. Them again, Lily, he breathed, taking a step closer, his voice roar with emotion. His longing to touch her, to draw her closer to him and end the years of suffering he had caused, told him what to do. Tell me how to fix this, and tell me how to get you to believe in me once more. Her lips trembled as she breathed in, parting slightly as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. And Martin felt his chest tighten at the vulnerability in her eyes, at the way she looked at him, as if she wanted so badly to trust him, but was terrified of being harmed once more. And God, he resented himself for making her feel that way. He resented the fact that he had once been so blind to the love she had always given so freely, but he wouldn't make that mistake again. He couldn't, because if he lost her, he would now be nothing more than a shell of the man he had once been if she left him now. Everything, but I was too stupid to see it, so I'm not sure if I can, she whispered. Finally, her voice trembled, and her eyes sparkled with unwiped tears. If this is true, you won't wake up tomorrow and go back to the man you used to be? The man who looked like her pain, cut right through me, as if I didn't exist, like a knife. Martin felt his throat tighten as a deep, bleeding wound to his soul. The overwhelming need to fix this, to make see that he would never go back to being that man, that the thought of ever looking through her again, of ever making her feel invisible, was unthinkable. He rasped, unbearable, impossible, I swear to you, Lily. His trembling fingers wrapped around her delicate wrists as he reached for hers. I will never be that man. Again, I will never make you feel like you are anything less than my entire world, because you are. You always have been, and was too blind, too stupid, too goddamn obsessed with my own ambitions to see it. But I see it now, I see you. And if that's what it is, I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Takes her breath came, in shallow gasps, her chest rising and falling rapidly, and Martin could feel the rapid pulse beneath his fingertips, could see the way her body trembled under his touch, and he knew she felt it too. Knew she wasn't immune to him, that no matter how much she tried to guard herself, no matter how much she tried to hold back, there was still something between them, something that had only been buried under years of neglect and had never changed. You can't just say these things and expect me to believe them in silence, she whispered, but her voice was weaker now, her resolve cracking, and Martin knew he knew this was his chance, and he had to show her with his actions as well as his words. He pleaded, his hands sliding up her. Let me prove it, with everything he had. Arms, his touch, reverent worship, as if she were sacred to him. Allowed me to show you how much I have always loved you. She had no right to touch but could not live without. Trembled under his touch, her eyes locked on his for the first time, and Martin observed a change in them over time, and observed the barrier she had constructed around her heart begin to crumble, saw the fire that had once burned so brightly between them begin to reignite. And he knew then in that moment that he wasn't just fighting for her forgiveness, he was fighting for her love, for their future, for the chance to hold her again, to kiss her again, to make her his in every way that mattered. And he would not lose this fight. He would not lose her slowly, hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure whether she was making a mistake. Lily lifted her hand, her fingers grazing over his jaw, tracing the sharp lines of his face, and Martin nearly groaned at the contact, at the way her touch sent fire racing through his veins at the way his body acted to pull her closer, to claim her, and make her his again. "Martin," she whispered, "if you hurt me again." "I won't survive it," barely audible voice. His chest tightened as he held on to her. As he looked into her eyes, his own soul came to the surface. "I'd rather die than hurt you." Again he swore, his voice filled with an intensity that left no room for doubt. No, there would be no room for anything other than the undeniable fact of his love for her. And then before she could speak, before she could pull away, before she could second-guess herself, Martin closed the distance. His lips colliding with hers as he wrapped his arms around her, as if he would never let go. And in that moment, as she melted against him, as her hands fisted in his shirt, Martin knew this was because he gave him a desperate kiss back. Only the beginning, the moment their lips met, Martin felt the world tilt on its axis, felt every ounce of regret, every ounce of wasted time, and every ounce of pain. Distance between him and the melt away as he desperately and fiercely kissed her, wrapping his arms around her. Around her as if he could somehow draw her inside of him, as if he could never let go of her. Because this was everything. This was what he'd been missing, what he had been too blind to cherish, what he had let slip through his fingers all those years ago. But not tonight, not now, not never again, because Lily was always his and would never be taken away from him. Her go once more, never letting anything stand in their way, never letting a day go by without her feeling it. Drowning in his love for her, a love he had previously been too foolish to show, and the kiss grew deeper. As his hands slid up her back, as his body pressed against hers, he felt her tremble beneath him, and he could feel her soft gas into his mouth. Fingers clung to his shirt as if she needed him just as much as he needed her. He had never desired anything more than this, and God, he had never her more than he wanted to. Claim her, honor her, and show her with every kiss and touch. Every hushed plea demonstrated just how madly, obsessively, and forever he loved her. He rasped at Lily's lips. His breath was uneven, and his body was burning he felt like a man starving, like he'd been wandering through an endless desert, his needs so intense, aching and dying for even a drop of her. And now that he has her, now that she is his, was in his arms, now that he could feel her heart racing against his. There was because she had awakened something he had no choice but to continue, hold back, or return to the icy, distant man he had been previously. There was nothing that could contain something dark, primordial, and devouring in him. Now no rest draining the madness of his love, no silencing the obsessive hunger that demanded more and more, including telling him, "Tell me you're mine," he begged. He pulled her closer, his lips trailing down her jaw, his hands clenching around her waist out of fear that she would vanish. As if he was afraid that this was all just a cruel dream and that he would be alone again, drowning in his own empty space. Own making, but she then softly sighed, her breath becoming warm against his skin, and when she tilted her head back and whispered his name, she made herself available to him in a way that made him completely unravel. Martin was aware that this was real, that she was present, and that she desired this just as much as he did, and he nearly lost himself right then and there. Say it. He pleaded with Lily in a rough, desperate ache because he had to. She needed to let him know that she was just as much his as he was. Hear it. Was hers because he was completely and utterly hers, mindlessly, and he would spend the rest of his life showing her. Her fingers shook as they moved up his chest as she clutched the fabric of his shirt in her small hands. And then after what felt like an eternity, she looked up at him. Her eyes filled with something so raw, so fragile, and so beautiful that it almost broke my heart. "I was always yours, Martin," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it was everything to him, his salvation and the oxygen in his lungs. He had never desired anything more in his entire life, the blood coursing through his veins and the beat of his heart. He let out something that was somewhere between a groan and a sigh of relief after the strangled sound, and then he kissed her once more, claiming her and devouring her, pouring all of their love, regret, and passion into the kiss. Because if words weren't enough, if apologies weren't enough, then he would show her, he would make her feel it would devote the rest of his life to ensuring that she never doubted him again. Sliding his hands up her sides and memorizing each inch of her revving as she leaned into him and exclaimed his name. In the way that her body fit him so perfectly, as if she were made for each other, him as if they had been sculpted from the same piece of destiny, were ripped apart too quickly and were then brought back together in this moment, in this desperate, afflictive, beautiful reunion. Souls, I love you, Lily, he murmured against her skin, his lips pressing, uncontrollable, reverent kisses along her jaw, neck, and collarbone. Unable to stop, unable to do anything but worship the woman who had brought him back to life, the woman who had reignited, the woman who had given him a second chance, the fire in his cold, empty heart. I love you so much that it hurts a little softly, even if she hadn't fully realized it yet. After SOB got away, she wrapped her arms around him tightly and began kissing him, just as desperately and wildly as before. As hopelessly, and Martin knew then, in that moment, that he had one, that she was his, truly was his, in every important way, and nothing could compare. Ever take her away from him again? Martin had never known what it meant to truly be obsessed with something, had never understood the kind of love that consumed every inch of his being, every waking up and thinking about every sleepless dream, until Lily, in the night he died, had finally returned to touching her, held her the way he was supposed to, and poured all of his love into her, and watched as she shattered beneath him, trembling in his arms, whispering his name like a prayer that only he had the ability to respond. And now, as the first golden rays of the morning light passed through, Martin recognized the sleeping woman because of the soft glow cast by the sheer curtains in their bedroom. He had lost everything for her and knew there was no turning back, that he had crossed a line that could never be crossed again because he was now hers in every way, body and soul, that mattered, mind you. He was no longer the icy, ruthless businessman he had been in the past. Nothing left of the man who had spent 3 long years drowning himself in deals and numbers, in meaningless transactions, because none of it had ever mattered. None of it had ever filled the void in his heart the way she did, as she had always done. And he noticed the delicate curve of her bare shoulder as he looked down at her sleeping form, peeking out from beneath the sheets at the way her soft, tousled hair framed her face, at the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept peacefully beside him. Martin felt something tighten in his chest, something raw and possessive and so terrifyingly powerful that he didn't know how to contain it, because the thought of ever losing her again, the thought of ever letting her slip through. He swore right then, and his fingers were unbearable, unthinkable, and impossible. There he determined that he would never allow himself to spend the rest of his life regaining the years he had wasted, for the love she once gave so freely, for the nights she had spent alone. He couldn't have seen it because he was too stupid, stubborn, and blind to see it. His fingers traced lightly across her cheek, memorizing the suppleness of her skin, and it moved on its own. Revving in the way she sighed in her sleep unconsciously, leaning into his touch as if she was drawn to him, even in her dreams. And Martin felt something dangerously tender bloom in his chest, something he had never felt before, something that went beyond mere desire, beyond mere passion. This was love, real, raw, unfiltered love, the kind that stripped him bare, that made him feel vulnerable in a way he never had before. And because Lily was the only thing in this, he embraced it for the first time in his life. He would spend the rest of his life demonstrating that the world that he now cared about was the only thing that had ever mattered to him. It to her, "You don't get to run from me anymore, Lily," he murmured, his voice rough. His fingers trailed over the soft column of her throat as he felt the steady pressure with emotion. Rhythm of her heartbeat beneath his touch, knowing that it was beating for him now that she was his now, and his intense desire to repeatedly claim her was fueled by possessiveness as a result of the realization. Until there was no part of her that didn't belong to him, until she understood just how deeply, how madly, how he loved her forever. And when he touched her, she shook, her eyes opening wide, and her sleepy, dazed eyes met his, and she softly blinked up at him. vulnerable look that made his chest ache. Martin felt his entire world tilt, felt because she was so damn beautiful. He felt something dark and primal rise within him, heartbreakingly perfect, and she was his, and nothing in this world would ever again take her from him. Martin, she whispered, thick with sleep, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. And Martin didn't give her a chance to think, because he was already leaning down, so she didn't have a chance. Capturing her lips in a kiss that was as desperate as it was tender, as possessive as it worshipped his hands, cradling her face as if she were the most valuable thing in the world. Thing in the world because she was, and he would never let her forget it, never. Don't let her think twice about how much she meant to him or how much he loved her, how madly he needed her. You're mine, he whispered against her lips, his voice rough and shaky with a raw emotion that almost broke him. Do you? Understand that, Lily, you are mine and I will never let you go. She shivered under him once more, her fingers getting caught in his hair, and when she melted into him, she gave him a second kiss without hesitation or fear. Martin was aware that she felt it as well, that she had finally returned to him after putting up walls around herself. The realization that she was once again his in every meaningful way, and his deepest desire was shattered by the realization, as a powerful wave of love washed over him, consuming so maddening that he didn't know how to contain it, didn't know how to be gentle when every single cell in. Until there was no doubt, his body screamed to claim her, to worship her, and to show her how much he loved her. Until she realized that he would spend the rest of his life compensating for every moment he had wasted, for each and every night he had spent ignoring the thing that was most important to him, and each and every second he had given her the impression that she wasn't his entire world. He whispered, "I love you, Lily," once more, his voice breaking, his hands shaking as they traced her skin, as he vowed to memorize every aspect of her quietly but ferociously, so that he would never allow another night to pass without showing, telling, and proving to her just how much she meant to him. "I love you so much, it's driving me mad." And as she pulled him closer, as she whispered his name, like a soft, desperate plea, as she gave in to the love that had always existed between them, and wrapped herself around him, that their story was far from over, that this was only the beginning, and that he would spend each and every day for the rest of his life to ensure that Lily never questioned how much Martin, who adored her, could no longer bear the thought of even a second passing. Without touching her, without experiencing her body's warmth against his, and without hearing her soft, breathless whispered his name, and he now held her tightly with his arms around her. Delicate body, his lips tracing reverent kisses along her shoulders' bare skin. He realized there was nothing, absolutely nothing in this world that could ever compare to the way she made him feel, to the way she ignited he feared he was consumed by a fiery, uncontrollable, and completely consuming fire within him. Might never come to terms with the fact that he might spend the rest of his life submerged in the madness of the love he made. Entire soul ache from an unbearable need to venerate, cherish, and assert her in every possible way, until there was no longer any doubt in her heart that she realized that she was now his forever and ever. And as she shook in his arms, her body instinctively curled closer to his as she let out a soft, sleepy sigh. Martin felt something inside him snap, something primal and desperate and far too powerful to contain, because she was here, she was his, and nothing else in the world mattered, Lily. He breathed, his voice rough with emotion, his fingers tracing delicate patterns across her skin, as if to memorize every her, as if he could somehow etch the feel of her into his soul so that no force in the universe could ever take her away from him again. And when she blinked up at him, her eyes still hazy with sleep, still heavy from the night they spent together in a whirlwind of love and passion. At tangled whispered confessions, Martin felt his chest tighten with something so fierce, so all-consuming, that it nearly stole the breath from his lungs, because she was the most precious thing, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, irreplaceable, and he knew in that moment that he would die before he ever let her go again. "You're looking at me Like I might vanish, Lily murmured, softly joking. But there was. Beneath her words was something more substantial, something vulnerable and hesitant. Moreover, Martin resented the fact that he had ever given her cause to doubt him. Hated that he had made her feel like she wasn't the most important thing in his life for 3 years when, in point of fact, she was the only thing that had ever really mattered to him, and he would spend every day of his life with her. Life, making sure she knew it and never having to wonder how much he loved her. Again, this is due to the fact that I can't lose you, he admitted, his voice low and raw and filled with a desperation he didn't even try to hide because there was no use pretending anymore. No use acting like he was anything other than being completely obsessed with her, and the way she made him feel with her actions single-handedly changed the course of his entire life. With nothing more than a smile as he traced his thumb across as he held her face in his hands and cued. Martin could tell by the curve of her cheek that he had passed the point of no return, that Lily had broken him and stripped him, so there was no going back to the cold, distant man he had been before. He had never wanted to be anything other than what Bear had transformed him into. That previous version of himself once more. "I love you, Lily," he whispered, brushing his lips. His breath mixed with hers as he held her close, as if he could against hers. Somehow connect their souls, as if he could make her feel exactly how I love you so much that it scares me deeply, madly, and completely that he was hers. She let out a soft, shaky breath, and for a while she just stared at him. She looked wide-eyed, trying to decide if she could believe him, whether she could trust him, and the thought of her doubting him even for a second sent a sharp pain slicing through his chest. But she finally gave him a small, tender smile, after what seemed like an eternity. Heartbreakingly gorgeous smile that turned his entire world upside down. "Don't be afraid, Martin," she whispered as she reached up and traced her fingers across his jaw. "Because I also love you." He felt his whole soul shake. Because of this, something within him finally settled and found peace. Everything was exactly as he had anticipated, as he had envisioned it, and he did so without a second thought. He kissed her again without saying a word, giving her every ounce of his love. Out of love and gratitude into the kiss, because she was now his. Forever. And nothing in the world could alter the fact that the kiss grew increasingly desperate. As he pressed her back against the pillows and moved his hands around, something intensely consuming, something hot consumed him. Over her supple curves as she gasped his name in a way that made his blood turn to fire. Martin knew that this was only the beginning, that he would spend the rest of his life making her feel so utterly loved and desired, revered. And as he once more lost himself in her, he etched his name into her skin with each kiss and touch. He vowed to keep every hushed promise and never let another day go by without showing her, without demonstrating to her, or making sure she was absolutely certain that she was the very air in his lungs, the beat of his heart, and he are the center of his universe. Would never ever let her go again. Martin had thought he knew what it meant to love a woman, had thought he understood the depths of desire, the pull of passion, the intoxicating rush of having someone completely his. But as he lay next to Lily, he wrapped his arms around her. His body still pressed against hers from the night they had spent drowning in each other. He realized that he had never, not until now, not until she had, truly understood what love was. Shattered every barrier he had ever built and quietly entered his life. Strength that had completely destroyed him due to his obsession, madness, and desperate state. Consuming hunger to be near her, her to feel her, to love her. This was what it meant to belong to someone. And as he traced his fingers along the curve of her bare spine, as he pressed a lingering, Martin gave her a kiss on the shoulder as he inhaled her skin's heavenly scent. That she had ruined him for anyone else, that he would never love another woman the way he loved her, and that because Lily was everything the air in, would rather burn in this fire forever than spend a single second without her. His lungs, the blood in his veins, the very heartbeat in his chest, and he needed her in a way that almost hurt, leaving him feeling raw, exposed, and completely complete. "Hers, you're staring at me again." Lily murmured, her voice soft teasing, But when she turned to face him, when her sleepy eyes met his, there was something deeper there, something tender, something vulnerable, and it made Martin's chest tighten, made something fierce and protective surge inside him, because she still didn't fully believe him, still didn't trust that he would stay, that he would love her this way forever. And the thought about it as the possibility that she might continue to doubt him despite everything, every kiss, every whispered promise. After spending each and every moment worshiping her, he displayed a sharp possessive. He would never allow her to think for even a moment, which made fire run through his veins. A second that his love was temporary, that this fire between them would ever fade. And without saying a word, he reached for her, pulling her up against him and pressing his forehead against her. Hers, his breath mingling with hers as he whispered, "I need you to understand something, Lily." She shivered at the intensity in his voice, her fingers instinctively gripping his arms, her lips separating a little as though she already knew and felt it. But Martin needed to say the words in order for her to hear them and understand them. She knew in her bones that he would never leave her, and that he would never stop loving her. He murmured, "Never let her go. I'm not going anywhere." His hands entangled in her. She couldn't help but look at him because her hair was tipped back, forcing her to do so. The unadulterated truth in his eyes, not today, not next year, not ever. "Hear me, Lily, I'm yours. I've always been yours, and I will spend every single day of my life as evidence for you." Her breath hitched, her lips slightly trembling, and for a moment she simply stared at him as if trying to find the words, as if trying to process the weight of his confession. But then after what felt like an eternity, she smiled a small, soft. Martin's breathtakingly beautiful smile sparked something inside of him that his entire world tilt on its axis, and without thinking, without hesitation, he was kissing her once more, with every ounce of love, pity, and devotion into the kiss, because she was his due to the fact that she had always been his due to. She was the only thing that mattered in this world, so he kissed her harder as he moved his hands as he pulled her beneath him and once more lost himself in her. Martin realized that this was only the beginning by saying that no matter how many nights he kissed her, they spent tangled together in love and passion and whispered confessions, it would never be enough. He would never get enough because loving Lily was the only thing he knew how to do now. The only thing that made sense, the only thing that made his cold, ruthless world feel warm once more. And as he held her close, she gasped his name and clung to him with her fingers. Martin swore to him that he would never let another day go by, acting as though he were the only thing keeping her grounded. Without showing her, without telling her, without proving to her just how deeply he adored her, so madly and completely, because of this love, this fire, and madness, it wasn't something that could ever fade, wasn't something that could ever be tamed, and Martin didn't want it because of this. He didn't want to ever go back to the man he had been before her. Was now a man who was hopelessly and obsessively in love with his. He and his wife would spend each and every breath ensuring that she would never forget. Martin's eyes kept wandering, and he couldn't stop looking at her, as she stood in front of the window, bathed in the soft golden glow of over every delicate curve of Lily's body. Morning sun, her silky nightgown clinging to her figure, in a way that caused his entire body to become tense with unbridled lust. But it wasn't just her beauty that held him captive. Rather, it was her whole body, the way she stood there, unaware of how completely mesmerizing she was, the way she had no idea just how deeply she had consumed him, how thoroughly she had invaded every corner of his mind, his heart, his very existence several years. He had been blind, he had been foolish, had pushed her away, had convinced himself that business, power, wealth were the only things that mattered. But as he stared at her, he realized how much he had almost forgotten and taken for granted. Felt an overwhelming surge of love's possessiveness, so strong it hurt his chest, and at that exact moment he knew there was no turning back. Without her, he couldn't live. World in which she wasn't the very center of his universe, and as he moved toward her, as he wrapped his arms around, he heard the soft pull from behind her waist, pulling her flush against his naked chest. The brief tenseness in her body before the gasp that came out of her lips could be felt, absorbing his touch and sending a rush of warmth through his veins because he had spent so much time with her that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with how much he loved her. Ignoring this for a long time and pretending that he didn't need, want, or ache for her in ways he couldn't even begin to put into words, but now there was no more. Pretending, no more denying, no more pushing away what had always been inevitable. And as he buried his face in the crook of her neck, as he inhaled the soft, intoxicating scent of her, as he pressed a lingering kiss to her skin, he whispered, "You have no idea how madly I love you, Lily." She shivered in his arms, her breath hitching at the raw emotion in his voice, at the way his words were not just an admission, but a vow, an unbreakable promise not to let her go or make her feel unwelcome again. And she looked up at him with those deep, mesmerizing eyes that had always had the wheat when she turned in his arms, power to bring him down. He felt something snap inside of him. Because she was his, she was finally destroyed and rebuilt simultaneously. His, and he would never, never let her forget it, never let her doubt it. And as he cued her face, as he traced his thumb over her cheek, as he tilted her chin up to claim her lips in a kiss, so deep, so searing, so filled with every ounce of, he felt her sigh against him, the way she clung to him, the way her hands fisted, love he had held back for years, against his skin as if she needed him just as much as he needed her. The realization of it, the sheer intensity of knowing she wanted him, loved him, craved him the way he did. Her sent a wild hunger that he could not control, a hunger that had nothing to do with physical need and everything to do with the soul deep connection they shared. Because Lily wasn't just his wife, she was his addiction, his obsession, the only thing that could make him feel alive. And as he lifted her into his arms, as he carried her to their bed, as he laid her down and hovered over her, tracing his fingers along the delicate line of her jaw, he whispered, "I wasted 3 years the way I should have. And I swear to you, I will spend every single day making up for it and ensuring that you never again feel alone." Her lips, her eyes parted, glistening with emotion, and she whispered his name as she reached up to touch his face. Martin knew then that there was so much love and tenderness that it made his chest tighten, that the life they shared mattered more to her than anything else in the world. "We're going to build together." And as he pressed his forehead against hers and traced his lips over every square inch of her skin, has memorized her, revered her, and claimed her in every way possible, he vowed to himself that he would never let another second pass without making sure she knew, without making sure she felt just how deeply, how madly, how irrevocably he loved her. Because Lily wasn't just the woman he had married, she was the only woman who had ever mattered, the only woman who ever would. And as he poured every ounce of passion, love, and devotion into every kiss, caress, and whisper confession, Martin knew that this love, this fire, this madness, it wasn't something that would ever fade, wasn't something that could ever be tamed, and he didn't want it to be, didn't want to ever go back to the man he had been before her, because this was who he was. He is now hopelessly and obsessively in love with his wife, and would use each and every breath to make sure she never forgot it. Martin couldn't bear the thought of another second passing without showing Lily just how madly, obsessively, irrevocably he was in love with her. Because after 3 years of ignoring her, allowing business to consume him, and erroneously assuming that power and wealth could ever compare to the warmth of her touch, the sweetness of her laughter, the fire in her eyes when she looked at him, he had finally woken up, finally realized that nothing, absolutely nothing in this world mattered more than her. And now that he had her in his arms after feeling her body's intoxicating heat, beneath his, now that he had heard the breath, less way she moaned his name when he kissed her after tracing his fingers along every soft spot, he was absolutely certain that he would never let her go because of her delicate skin. Once more, he never let her think twice about how much he loved her. Lily was more than just his wife. She was his entire world, the air he breathed the only thing that made his heart beat, and as he lay beside her, watching the gentle rise and fall over her, in the gentle morning light chest, watching the way her long lashes fluttered slightly as she slowly stirred. He awoke to a strong, almost painful ache in his chest and a longing deep to the point where he couldn't breathe at the mere thought of not being able to hold her like this, of not being able to wake up beside her every morning for the rest of his life was unbearable. And as she slowly opened her eyes, as she looked up at him with a sleepy, love-drunk gaze that made his Martin's heart clenched, and he was unable to hold back the urge to pull her against him and press a desperate, searing kiss to her lips, pouring every ounce of love, of devotion, of need into it. Because words would never be enough, because no matter regardless of how many times he whispered her name, he never stopped telling her how much he loved her. Would never be enough to express just how deeply, how madly, how hopelessly he was hers. And as her fingers slipped into his hair and she melted into him, she sighed against his mouth. Martin felt something inside him break something. Because she was everything to him, she also saved his sanity, and his madness, his salvation, and his sweetest sin. And he knew in that moment that there was no escaping this, no breaking free, because he didn't just love Lily, he was her whole body and soul, and nothing on earth could separate them. Never change that, and he gently brushed her lips with a tender thumb as he pulled away just enough to look into her eyes. Whispered, "You've ruined me, Lily. I'll never be the same again, and I don't want to be." And she let out a soft gasp, her eyes sparkling with tears. Tears! And when she whispered his name, with that love-filled, trembling voice, he felt his entire body tighten with raw emotion. Emotion Martin knew he was lost, knew there was no going back, no returning to the cold, heartless man he had been before her, because this was who he was now. A man who lived and breathed for his wife, of a man who would do anything and sacrifice everything to see her smile. Just to hold her in his arms for one more second and hear her laugh, he leaned in and kissed her again more slowly. This time savoring every second, every soft, sweet sound she made. He knew that he would spend the rest of his life proving to her everything he believed in, regardless of what happened or what the future held. Just how madly, deeply, irrevocably he was in love with her. Because this love, this obsession, this madness, it wasn't something he had chosen, wasn't something he could control. And as he pulled her even closer, as he whispered sweet, he made desperate promises to her, knowing he would never want to Martin. Had never known love like this before, never imagined that he could feel something so deep, so overwhelming. So overwhelming that it consumed every part of him, every breath, and every heartbeat, every thought. And as he lay beside Lily, his beautiful, mesmerizing wife, observing the soft, steady movements with which her chest rose and fell, he felt his heart swell with emotions so powerful they nearly brought him to his knees, because for 3 years now that he had finally opened his eyes, finally realized what had been in front of him all along. He would never make that mistake again, never let another second pass without making sure she knew just how deeply, how madly, how irrevocably he loved her, because she wasn't just his wife, she was the very center of his universe and was his reason for breathing. He reached out as he traced his fingers gently over the soft, delicate curve as she slowly opened her eyes. Lily moved her lashes, shaking her cheek. And when they looked at each other, he saw pure, unadulterated love. In her eyes, Martin felt his chest tighten, felt a lump form in his throat, because how had he ever been so blind? How had he ever let a single day go by without telling her and without showing her how much she meant to him? Leaned in and whispered, "Good morning, my love," giving her a tender, lingering kiss on the forehead. Smile curled at her lips, her fingers reaching up to brush against his bare chest, and the warmth of her touch sent a shiver down his spine, igniting something deep and primal that had existed before. Since the day he finally allowed himself to fall in love with her, the way she deserved, and as she looked up at him, as she whispered his name with that soft, breathless voice that never failed to make his heart race, Martin knew in that moment that he would do anything, anything in this world, to make her happy, to keep her safe, to love her in a way that no one ever had before. And as he cued her face, as he tilted her chin up so she was looking straight into his eyes, he murmured, Lily, I don't deserve you. Her brows furrowed slightly, her lips separating as if to argue. But he refused to give her a chance because he needed her to comprehend. To know just how deeply he regretted every second he had spent ignoring her, every moment he had let slip by when he could have been holding her kissing her, making love to her. And as he brushed his thumb over her lips as he gazed at her, with all of his love, devotion, and madness that he had been accumulating for so long, he whispered, "But I swear to you with everything I am, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." A single tear slipped down Lily's cheek, and Martin felt his chest tighten, felt his control snap because he couldn't bear to see her cry. Couldn't. He leaned in, unable to bear the thought that he had caused her suffering. As he kissed away the tear with soft, reverent lips, he murmured against her skin, "You are everything to me, Lily. My heart, my soul, my life there is." She let out a shaky breath, "And I would do anything for you in the world." Then before he could say another word, before he could continue to pour out all the love, all the adoration that had been building up within him, Lily suddenly reached out and wrapped her fingers around him as she dragged him to the ground, pressing her lips against his in a kiss so deep, deep, so intense, it stole the very air from his lungs, and Martin groaned, closing his arms around her and pressing his body against her as he completely lost himself in her, because he had never desired to be saved, and this was his heaven. Never wanted to be with anyone else because Lily was his, and she was his, and nothing about this made him want to be with anyone else. The world could never alter that, and as he rolled her beneath him, he kissed her across the neck. He promised himself that the soft, delicate curve of her shoulder, down to her collarbone, he would spend every single day proving his love for her, worshiping her, cherishing her in every way possible. Martin would ensure that she had everything she deserved because she deserved it. It ensured that she would never again experience loneliness. And as he gazed down at her, he whispered, "I love you, Lily," madly, tracing his fingers across her skin as if committing every part of her to memory. Frantically and interminably, her lips shook and her eyes shone with emotion when she replied, "I also love you, Martin, more than—" Whatever it was he was certain of, this passion, this love unbreakable bond between them, was forever, and as he kissed her again, as he held her close, as he lost himself in her love and warmth, which could not be denied, Martin knew that he had finally found his home, because they were meant to be. He had it for years, and nothing in the world could ever take it away from him. Despite the fact that time had passed, Martin's affection for Lily had only intensified, in the most beautiful way, because he was madly in love with her that night from the moment he met her, had seen her for the first time, and there was no going back. There was no escape. From the passionate love he had for his wife to the moment he was standing at the doorway of their grand estate, watching Lily cradle their newborn daughter in her arms, his heart clenched with a love so potent that it took his very breath away, because nothing, not even his wildest dreams, could have prepared him for the overwhelming emotions that filled his soul every time he looked at his family and the woman who changed his life when they created the perfect angel. And as he walked slowly and carefully toward them, his gaze remained fixed on them. He felt as though the universe had slowed down as he looked at Lily's face, had worked together to grant him this one perfect moment when nothing else mattered, not even his business. He once believed that power was more important than wealth because, in the end, wealth was this love, this family that truly meant the world to him. And as he reached out, he gently cued Lily's face, tilting her chin in the process, up so he could look into her eyes, and he saw everything he'd ever wanted in her. Back at him, love, joy, and a bright future that made his chest hurt. With thanks and a smile as she leaned into his embrace, as she whispered his name with the same gentle, love-filled voice that had Martin, who was weak, was certain that he was the luckiest man in the world because he had not only found love, but also the greatest present of all was a lifetime with the woman he adored. And as he sat down and gave her a tender, long-lasting kiss, "You have given me everything, Lily," you whispered against her mouth, "and I swear to spend the rest of my life loving, defending, and adoring you. Filled her eyes with pure, unfiltered emotion as she reached up, cupping his face in her delicate hands, and when she whispered, "You already do, my love, every single day." Martin felt something break free within him, because this was what he had been missing. He looked down to see what had been waiting for him all along. At their daughter, at the tiny beautiful miracle, sleeping peacefully in Lily's arms, he knew that his heart, his soul, his entire being belonged to them. And then as he knelt, he realized that he was alone, and nothing could ever change that. He silently made a vow as he gently kissed his daughter's forehead, a promise to spend every waking moment ensuring that she knew how deeply and fiercely he loved her. As her mother was, because Lily had demonstrated to him that true power did not come from her teaching him what love truly meant from business deals or financial empires, but from the ability to give your heart to someone completely. And as he held his wife and pulled her into his arms, Martin whispered one final promise, one that would endure among them close. Lifetime. I will never stop loving you, not in this life, not in the next, you, Lily. You will always be my heart. And as she melted into him, as their Martin knew everything about the baby's soft, content sigh as it moved in her arms. That this was his greatest achievement, his greatest success, and that no matter what the future held, he would spend every single day proving that his love, his devotion, his obsession lasted a lifetime.